In the park, a man squatted next to a trash can, giggling and saying, "You're so beautiful."
Out of curiosity, I touched the trash can and found it soft and smooth, like human skin. When I reached inside, I felt bones. It turned out to be a human flesh trash can.
A woman's body had been cut in half and hollowed out to make this gruesome container. My name is John Smith, nicknamed King of Hell, and I'm a detective. On December 22, 2010, I was walking to the police station carrying some breakfast, stepping on the snow-covered ground.
King of Hell, get in the car, there's a case.
In the police car, David told me that the station had just received a report from Green Grove Community saying they found a bizarre trash can at the back gate.
Is there a dismembered body inside?
It's even weirder than that. The trash can itself is made of human parts.
When we arrived, the place was already crowded. Police officers were maintaining order around a thick trash can in the center. Even from a distance, the eerie graffiti on the can was noticeable.
A girl in a skirt was exaggeratedly spreading her legs, rubbing a milk bottle against her bottom, while several wild dogs were opening their mouths wide at her.
Wearing gloves, I walked over and stood next to the trash can. Some of the paint had been rubbed off, revealing the inner lining. The lining was a strange cinnamon color, resembling pigskin from afar, contrasting sharply with the graffiti.
The human flesh and blood inside had been hollowed out, but there was still a salty, fishy smell. The inner layer of skin was very thin, with small bumps on it. I reached into the trash can and could feel the scapula, ribs, spine, and finally the tailbone. The outermost layer was human skin with flesh, soft on the outside and hard on the inside, about 3 centimeters thick.
After a simple examination, I had some ideas. The perpetrator must have cut her in half, taken the part from the chest to the hips, hollowed it out, and made it into a trash can, disguising it with graffiti. What kind of deep-seated hatred did he have to come up with such a twisted method?
Who discovered the body?
It was me. It was me.
A sturdy woman ran over to me.
I was scavenging nearby and wanted to find something inside, but as soon as I reached in, I felt a big bone stuck to the flesh. I was scared out of my wits and immediately called the police.
Were there any other people around when you found the trash can?
No, I found it at 4 in the morning, and I was the only one there.
This thing has been here for more than a day or two, and no one noticed.
Well, it's usually full of trash. Who would look closely?
This perpetrator is a real twisted individual, killing someone and then desecrating the body like this. How much hatred must he have?
King of Hell, what do we do now? It's not easy to examine the body here.
Let's take it back to the forensic department. The medical examiner can check it out. Also, bring the trash inside. There might be some tissue remnants.
Got it.
After David finished speaking, he and a few others took out a vacuum plastic wrap from the police car and covered the entire trash can, preparing to load it into the car. But just as we lifted the trash can, a shirtless young man suddenly rushed over from a distance. He was about 1.5 meters tall, with messy hair and a face full of pimples. His lips moved occasionally as if talking to himself.
It's my.
He seemed to be in a state of delirium, repeatedly saying the same phrase.
Could this young man know something about the trash can?
Just as I was about to speak, an old man came running over, apologizing and trying to drag the young man away. But the young man refused, even climbing into the trash can and obsessively licking the inner walls.
What a sin, what a sin.
Sir, Have you seen this trash can before?
No, no. The old man hesitated, his eyes avoiding mine.
Boy, come home with me. Don't interfere with the police investigation.
Your grandson's behavior is too strange, as if he knows this trash can. I'm afraid you can't leave now. Let's go to the station and talk.
The old man looked at me, seeing my determination, and reluctantly agreed. At the police station, the trash can was sent to the forensic department. Inside, only the upper torso of a body was found, the skull and limbs were missing. Despite deploying numerous officers, no related body parts were located near the Green Laurel community. The bizarre method of the crime and the true identity of the body remained unknown.
The deceased is a female, aged between 18 and 20. Her skin has not yet started to decompose, indicating she has been gone for less than 2 weeks.
David Green and I questioned the elderly man and his grandson based on the current situation.
My grandson's name is Mike Johnson. He was born with intellectual disabilities. Although Mike is now 18, his mental age is still that of a 5-year-old.
You are all bad people. You are all bad people.
After being warned by those around him, Mike gradually quieted down.
George Johnson, do you know if he has any close female friends of the same age?
Mike's parents died early, and I usually don't have time to take care of him. I don't know the people around him.
When did you first see this trash can?
It was last Tuesday. I had just come home and saw Mike sitting on the ground, holding this trash can.
Mike, where did you find this trash can?
I trash can.
It seemed we wouldn't get anything useful from him.
Why was this trash can outside today?
It's just a dirty thing. I didn't want it taking up space in the house, so I threw it out.
As he said this, Mike visibly shuddered.
So you already knew this trash can was made from a body?
I didn't think that. I just thought it was unclean and didn't want it in the house. Officer, I have to go to work tomorrow, and Mike can't stay outside all the time. Can we go home now?
I stared at them for a while.
You can go home for now, but we might need your cooperation later in the investigation. You must be available when called and cannot leave the city until the case is solved.
George Johnson was visibly stunned but said nothing, pulling his grandson up silently. After sending the grandfather and grandson out, I turned to David Green.
David, check their records, especially Mike's. Focus on the schools he attended and the hospitals he visited. And get someone to keep an eye on the Green Laurel community. Don't let them find a chance to escape.
Got it.
After arranging for David to leave, I sat at my desk to organize my thoughts. If my assumptions were correct, Mike's life trajectory would definitely intersect with that of the deceased woman. Given his behavior today, it was hard to tell if he was genuinely impaired or just pretending. The most crucial step now was to confirm the identity of the deceased to proceed with the investigation. With this in mind, I headed straight to the forensic department. Forensic expert Dr. Lee had just completed the DNA profile. We wasted no time and directly compared this data with the DNA database of missing persons from the past month. Half an hour later, we identified a girl named Emily Wilson. She was 18 years old and currently a high school senior. Strangely, her family reported her missing only the day before yesterday, 5 days after the trash can appeared. Why did her family wait nearly a week to report her missing? Emily Wilson came from a blended family. Besides her biological parents, she had a half-sister. We notified her family, but only her mother showed up at the police station. Emily's mother, Mary Wilson, was a typical housewife. She burst into tears as soon as she arrived, needing 2 people to help her sit down. I placed a cup of warm water in front of her.
Mrs. Wilson, please accept our condolences.
Officer, please, you must catch the person who did this to my Emily. Her life was just beginning. Just beginning.
We called you here today to discuss this matter. When did you first notice your daughter was missing? Why did you report it on the 20th?
She went to a winter camp with her classmates on the 14th and was supposed to return on the 19th, but she didn't come back that night. When I called, I found out she never went to the camp.
Does anyone know why?
I asked her classmates, but they all said they didn't know.
Has your daughter been in frequent contact with anyone recently, or has she exhibited any unusual behavior?
Linda Wilson furrowed her brows tightly and, after a while, spoke up.
She mentioned that a boy has been following her, even sneaking into her school. It really scared her.
Following her? Have you seen this person?
I haven't seen him. I only heard that he has some intellectual issues, looks quite unattractive, and isn't even as tall as her.
An image of Mike Johnson instantly popped into John's mind.
Besides this, can you think of any other clues?
No, nothing else.
Seeing her dazed state, John decided to wrap up.
All right, let's leave it at that for today. If you think of anything else later, please contact us promptly.
Okay.
She stood up in a daze, clutching a tissue tightly in her hand.
Why didn't your husband come with you?
Linda seemed surprised by the question, her eyes flickering slightly.
He's busy with work.
After saying this, she thanked John and hurriedly left the police station. John stared at her retreating figure, his mind racing. The current evidence all pointed to Mike Johnson. In cases he had handled, it wasn't uncommon for individuals with intellectual disabilities to commit serious acts, as they had no concept of the law and acted purely on their subconscious desires. However, the method used in this case was complex, involving the use of human bones to support the surroundings and extracting flesh and blood. Such an act couldn't be accomplished with brute force alone, it required some biological knowledge. John didn't think Mike Johnson had that capability. Unless he was pretending to be less capable. With this thought, John returned to his desk. David Green had already gathered all the information on both individuals and compiled it on the computer in front of John.
There are no records of Mike Johnson visiting a psychiatric clinic. Additionally, we found a connection between him and Emily Wilson. They were classmates in elementary school, but before they graduated, Mike Johnson had dropped out.
Looks like these two were childhood friends. Do you think Mike Johnson might have pretended to be less capable due to some childhood impulse and then committed the act?
It's possible.
Let's visit Mike Johnson's home. If the act was committed and the evidence handled there, there must be some clues left behind.
The next morning at 9, they drove the police car to the back gate of Green Vine Community. Not far away was a small bungalow where the Johnson family lived. John walked up and knocked on the door. It took nearly 20 minutes before the door opened a crack. Mike Johnson poked his head out. He was still shirtless. Upon seeing them, he pulled out a toy gun from behind and started shooting at them wildly.
John, this kid knows to pull a gun on us, so his intelligence seems fine.
Mike Johnson, is your grandfather home?
He didn't answer at all, instead lunging at David Green's leg and biting down hard.
Wow, strong bite.
David pulled the young man away by his collar. Given his current state, they wouldn't get any answers. To save time, it was better to go inside and investigate. John bypassed the two and walked directly into the house. The curtains were drawn tightly, and the floor was littered with half-concealed trash, with crayons of various colors scattered in the corners. One room was half open, emitting a foul odor. The room was filled with trash cans, each adorned with doodles of human figures. Although they wore red scarves around their necks, they were otherwise unclothed, pointing at their private parts with their fingers, their mouths wide open, and their eyes narrowed into lewd slits. The only fully dressed boy was Mike Johnson. They were arranged in 3 neat rows, with a duty roster written on the front wall. The layout of the room resembled a classroom from school days.
Wow, an art exhibition.
Let's search these bins and see if we can find any human remains.
Got it.
David rolled up his sleeves and started searching the first bin against the wall. They spent the entire morning there, but they didn't find any human remains or even a trace of blood. These were just ordinary trash bins.
John, do you think this kid might have hidden evidence?
Since they entered, Mike Johnson had been unusually quiet. His lips kept trembling, and he looked like a volcano ready to erupt. Just as John was about to speak, the door outside suddenly opened. The tension in the room was palpable.
Grandpa.
Mike Johnson finally found his support. He buried his head in George Johnson's embrace and started crying heavily.
What are you doing here? Do the police have the right to barge into private homes at will?
I placed the search warrant on the table.
Sorry, Mr. Johnson, but we have to do this today.
George Johnson glanced at me and David Green, then craned his neck to look at the things that had been turned out in the room. His expression changed unpredictably. He knew the matter couldn't be hidden any longer.
Mr. Johnson, we investigated Mike and found no records of him ever visiting a psychiatric clinic.
Officer, those hospitals are just out to scam people for money. Families like ours can't afford to take our kids there.
He sighed and sat down on a chair behind him.
If I told you that the trash can was really something Mike picked up, would you believe me?
Did you see it with your own eyes?
No, it's just, he doesn't have the capability to harm anyone.
As soon as George Johnson finished speaking, he pulled a toothpick out of his pocket and placed it in front of Mike. Mike only glanced at it for a moment before suddenly screaming and trying to claw at his own eyes, but George Johnson quickly grabbed him.
The first time I noticed he was different from other kids was because of this. Mike has a fear of sharp objects. He is terrified of anything with a pointed end and simply doesn't have the capability to harm anyone.
Why didn't you mention this earlier?
I stared at Mike's flushed face.
When that trash can first arrived at our home, I could tell it contained female bones. I knew it had nothing to do with Mike, but I didn't want him to get involved.
What about the other trash cans in the house?
Ever since he brought that trash can back, it's like he's been possessed. Every day, he goes out to find trash cans and brings them back to pile up in his room.
And you didn't stop him?
He's always been alone. When he finally showed some interest in something, I let him be. I thought, the more companions he had, the better.
He gazed intently at the trash cans, as if he were looking at an art exhibit. I watched him quietly, observing his micro-expressions to determine if he was lying. After a while, I sighed.
Mr. Johnson, we need to take Mike to a top-tier hospital's psychiatric department for an evaluation. We need to wait for the results before we can say anything further.
Do as you wish. Just please, once the matter is cleared up, don't come back here.
At the psychiatric department of the People's Hospital, Mike's diagnosis showed an IQ score of 65, indicating intellectual disability and mild developmental delay. The doctor also mentioned that Mike had an overactive adrenal gland, which, combined with his mental condition, triggered sharp object phobia, causing him to fear anything with a pointed end. Under these circumstances, although Mike knew Emily Wilson, he indeed lacked the capability to harm anyone. But if it wasn't him, could it have been his grandfather? To give Mike a companion, could George Johnson have harmed the girl and turned her into a trash can to stay with his grandson forever? But if that were the case, why would he discard the trash can and deliberately let the police find it? It didn't make sense logically or emotionally. If this matter had nothing to do with the grandfather and grandson, we could only start investigating from the day the victim went missing. The case seemed to have come full circle, back to the beginning. What a headache! David Green and I went to Emily Wilson's school and, with the help of the school administration, found her homeroom teacher, Ms. Davis, and a few classmates who were close to her. From them, I learned a new clue.
What? You mean Emily was supposed to be with the winter camp group that day?
Yes. She signed up and even paid the $200 registration fee.
Then why didn't she go?
Several girls sitting nearby answered eagerly.
She forgot her ID card.
Yeah, she was really anxious and asked us to help her find it.
She said she would go back to get it, but she never returned by the time the bus was supposed to leave. The group couldn't wait any longer, so they left without her. I should have called to confirm, but I was so busy those days that I forgot.
Did she often forget things?
Not in my opinion. She usually did very well in her studies and was a meticulous child.
Was there anyone at school she didn't get along with?
Not really, but she seemed to have trouble dealing with her family. Her mother often told me that Emily would argue with her at home, and she didn't know what to do.
Did she mention why?
No, but it's common for kids to go through a rebellious phase.
What about her father and sister? Have they ever come to the school?
I've never seen them.
The case continued to twist and turn, each revelation leading us deeper into a maze of uncertainty. After leaving the school, David Green turned to me, a look of determination on his face.
John, what do we do next?
I quickly reviewed the information we had gathered. We knew the unfortunate incident involving Emily Wilson occurred on December 14th, somewhere between the school and her home. The most troubling detail was her missing ID card.
David, logically, an 18-year-old wouldn't make such a basic mistake. Her teachers and classmates described her as meticulous and careful. Could someone have hidden her ID on purpose?
Preventing her from attending the winter camp that morning and taking advantage of the situation to harm her?
Precisely. The most likely suspects would be her family members. Her relationship with them was strained, which could be a breakthrough. David, head back to the police station. I'll go to Emily's home.
I rang the doorbell at Emily's home. A strikingly beautiful girl answered, her features somewhat resembling Emily's. This must be her half-sister, Sophia Wilson.
You're Sophia Wilson, right? I'm John Smith from the City Police Department. I'd like to ask you some questions about your sister's case. Please cooperate.
Sophia's brow furrowed slightly but quickly relaxed.
Come in, Officer Smith.
The home was small, less than 30 square meters, making it quite cramped for 4 people.
Are your parents home?
They're at work. I don't have classes today, so I'm staying at home.
She placed a cup of water in front of me. I remembered from the files that Emily's sister attended a regular university.
Why didn't you accompany your mother to the police station that day? After all, it was your sister. Didn't you want to see her one last time?
I was in class that day. I only heard about it later from my mom. It's so tragic what happened to my sister.
How was your relationship with your sister?
It was okay. We had our arguments, but we always made up quickly. Isn't that typical for sisters?
According to our investigation, your sister missed the winter camp on the 14th because she forgot her ID.
Her ID?
You haven't seen it?
No, something that important should be kept safe.
Where were you on December 14th?
I was at the school library.
She handed me a library card from her bag. It clearly marked her entry and exit times, December 14, 2010, 8 a.m., December 14, 2010, 10 p.m. If the timestamps were accurate, Sophia had an alibi.
Officer, you don't think I harmed my sister, do you? We had our disagreements, but it wasn't that serious.
Just then, a man reeking of alcohol stumbled in.
Dad!
Sophia hurriedly grabbed a jacket to cover her dress. This instinctive action seemed odd, a subconscious self-protective gesture.
Who are you?
I'm from the city police department, investigating your daughter Emily's case.
Emily? What does her situation have to do with us? You two alone in a room, who knows what you're up to?
Dad, he's a police officer.
So what if he's a cop? I'm not scared. If he dares, he can.
He didn't finish his sentence as Sophia quickly covered his mouth.
Officer Smith, my dad is talking nonsense right now. You won't get anything useful today. Maybe come back another time?
With that, she helped Robert into a bedroom, and they didn't come out again. Leaving the Wilson home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this family.
Though Sophia had an alibi, it wasn't foolproof. She could have lent her library card to someone else to create the illusion of her presence.
Back at the police station, I delved into the Wilson family's records. Two details stood out. First, Sophia bore an uncanny resemblance to her biological mother, almost like twins. Second, Sophia's college entrance exam score was 634, high enough to attend a prestigious university in another city, yet she chose a nearby regular university.
After years of hard work, no one would choose a mismatched school unless they had to stay close to home to care for someone or if the local university offered a substantial scholarship. However, Sophia didn't fit either scenario.
Then, I remembered Robert Wilson. The next morning, I applied for a summons to bring in Robert Wilson for questioning. To my surprise, he agreed immediately and arrived at the police station that afternoon. In the interrogation room, Robert Wilson sat with his legs straight, looking much more subdued than the previous day.
Name?
Robert Wilson.
Robert Wilson, where were you at 10 a.m. on December 14th?
I was out drinking.
Can anyone verify that?
No, I took a bottle to the back alley to drink. I was alone.
His expression was remarkably candid, and he didn't blink as he spoke.
Do you have anything to say about your daughter Emily Wilson's passing?
How could I possibly harm my own daughter? You police really can't tell right from wrong.
I didn't say you killed Emily. I asked if you had anything to say. Why are you so agitated?
Robert Wilson fell silent. His defiant attitude indicated that direct questioning wouldn't yield much.
All right, let's not talk about Emily. Let's talk about your older daughter. Sophia Wilson said she spent the entire day of December 14th in the school library. But I visited her school yesterday, and the librarian said the library was closed all day due to a power outage.
This was a lie, intended to gauge Robert Wilson's reaction. Sure enough, upon hearing this, Robert Wilson's nostrils flared and his eyes darkened.
I want to know why your daughter lied.
Robert Wilson hesitated for a long time before finally closing his eyes in pain.
I admit it. I was responsible for Emily's death.
During the subsequent interrogation, Robert Wilson insisted that he acted alone and that no one else was involved. However, when we asked about his motive and the whereabouts of the remaining remains, he claimed he couldn't remember. After Robert Wilson was taken into custody, David Green and I sat at our desks, eating instant noodles, both feeling down. During Robert Wilson's interrogation, I had sent Tom Brown to Sophia Wilson's school to verify her alibi for the 14th. The security guard at the gate said Sophia had left early that morning. Because of her striking appearance, the guard remembered her clearly. This contradicted Sophia's alibi. So when I confronted Robert Wilson with this, he changed his story. It's highly likely that Robert Wilson was covering for his daughter, or they might have conspired together. But with so much time having passed and the remains long destroyed, unless Robert Wilson recanted, we would have to close the case. After much deliberation, I decided to talk to Sophia Wilson again. But before that, I needed to see someone else. If I could get her testimony, it would solidify Sophia's involvement in the incident. A few days later, I arranged to meet Sophia Wilson at a park near Green Laurel Community. I arrived 10 minutes early, but Sophia was already there. When she saw me, she stood up from the bench.
Officer Smith.
You must know by now. Your father has confessed the crime.
Yes, he killed his own daughter. That's the punishment he deserves.
But is that really the truth? This was given to me by Ms. Wilson. She found it in your pillow.
Sophia didn't seem surprised to see the ID card. Her gaze darkened, and after a long pause, she spoke.
Officer Smith, let me tell you a story.
Originally, Sophia could have had a happy childhood. But when she was 3, a car accident took her mother away. Her father fell into despair and under pressure from her grandparents. Robert Wilson married Mary Wilson and had Emily in the same year. Mary was a good woman. Even after having Emily, she treated Sophia equally. Robert Wilson, feeling guilty, was initially more attentive to Sophia. But as time passed, he noticed that his daughter increasingly resembled his late wife. Sometimes, when Robert Wilson drank too much, he would mistake Sophia for her mother. To keep her close, he even changed her college application without her consent. Sophia had thought about resisting, but she couldn't forget her father's affection for her since childhood and chose to endure it. However, Emily, living under the same roof, soon discovered this. Emily Wilson had always been envious of her sister, Sophia.
How will you ever get married? Dad will never let you go.
Emily, please stop saying things like that.
Hey, sister, you're so dirty. Are you still a virgin? Does Dad know?
Initially, Sophia could swallow these rumors, but one day, Emily took some misleading photos and threatened to post them on Sophia's school forum.
One day, you'll regret this, Emily.
From that day on, Sophia made up her mind. She wanted her sister gone. She planned to act in the basement. Sophia hid Emily's ID card and, when Emily came home,
Emily, I think I saw your ID card in the bicycle basket in the basement.
Why did you touch my stuff? Fine, I'll go get it.
Once there, Sophia strangled Emily from behind, watching her life slip away. She then hollowed out her body to make a trash can and painted grotesque graffiti on it.
You called me dirty, so I'll make you hold trash every day, dirtier than ever.
Sophia, who was minoring in medicine at university, found this task not too difficult. But just then, the basement door opened, and her father, Robert Wilson, stood outside.
What have you done, Sophia?
After getting rid of her, I felt a huge relief. I never regretted it, only felt liberated.
What about Emily's head and limbs?
I don't know, maybe some stray dogs took them.
The investigator stared at her and took a deep breath.
Sophia, I can't judge your experiences, but taking a life is against the law. The law won't show mercy to anyone.
He stepped forward and cuffed her wrists.
I'm sorry, but we have to go.
Mary Wilson handed over the ID card to the police station, her eyes red once again. When she first married Robert Wilson, he wasn't overly attentive, but he did take care of her. However, as Sophia grew up, she noticed her husband's eyes were always on Sophia, and his care for her dwindled, even neglecting their marital relations.
Robert, why don't you ever look at me anymore?
Don't be ridiculous, Mary. I'm just busy.
She resented Sophia, believing she had stolen her husband's love. But as an adult, she couldn't confront Sophia directly. Instead, she complained to her daughter Emily.
Emily, you should scare Sophia with these photos. Teach her a lesson.
She never imagined this would lead to her daughter's demise. After Emily's death, Mary was suspicious and mentioned it to her husband multiple times.
Robert, what if Sophia had something to do with Emily's death?
Didn't Emily say someone was stalking her? Maybe it was that person. They're sisters, Sophia couldn't have done such a thing.
Mary was skeptical but kept her suspicions to herself. One day, she found her daughter's ID card in Sophia's discarded clothes, putting it in her pocket. When the police approached Mary, she finally learned the truth and immediately fell to her knees in anguish. After handing over the ID card to the police, Mary returned home.
Robert, I want a divorce.
She then left with her luggage, intending to spend the rest of her life seeking redemption. The radio was broadcasting a news story about a murder case recently solved by the city's criminal investigation team. Mike Johnson sat on the ground, continuing to draw on a trash can with a crayon.
Emily, I miss you so much.
He felt like a worm, wanting to cling to anything beautiful, including Emily. He had been Emily's classmate in elementary school, and they had sat together for a few years, which was the happiest time of his life. One day, he happened to see Emily hurrying home and decided to follow her. Unexpectedly, Emily went into a basement room with another girl. After a piercing scream, he heard a thud sound.
What is happening in there?
Although Mike's mind was still that of a child, he knew he should call the police. But he stayed still, hiding in a corner, immersed in the pleasant sounds. After dark, a man came out with a cart covered by a black cloth. Mike crouched and carefully followed, watching the man dig a big hole and bury the trash can. After the man left, it took Mike nearly 3 hours to dig out the trash can and hold it tightly in his arms.